Lambeau, going into the combine and after it, Bryce Young was the favorite to go number 1 overall, and then the Panthers got the number 1 pick, and C.J. Stroud jumped up to the heavy favorite to go number 1 overall. Now today, it's even money for both of them, C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young, to go 1 overall. What are your thoughts on that?
I've been saying it's Bryce Young for the last month. And look, there's one thing about the draft season that we have to be very careful about is there's perception and then there's the tape, right? And so the tape really favors Bryce Young tremendously. Now, I'm fully aware there are not many 5'10", 5'11" quarterbacks that play in the league, but Bryce Young has that it factor. He's unique. His tape is better. If Bryce Young were 6'2", he'd be the first pick easy. If Bryce Young were 6'2", the Bears would have never traded the pick. So I think when they made the move to trade up to get number 1, they knew they were taking Bryce Young. The rhetoric became, well, Frank Reich likes big quarterback. Look, in all respect to Frank Reich, this is David Tepper's decision. He owns the team. He gave away assets to move up there. He moved up there with the idea to get this unique player. We saw Jim Irsay say it at his press conference. That kid from Alabama looks pretty good. This is not a hard decision. Bryce Young's the best player. I've been saying it for a month. I'm surprised the market's been so slow to react to it. I think that's really the case. I think the other one that I think the market is overinflated is on Anthony Richardson. I think Anthony Richardson's uniquely talented. However, his game tape doesn't match his talent. And I think that anybody thinks he's going in the top 3 should be cautious because I don't think that's going to be the case. If you talk to teams, his talent doesn't match his tape. And you can't draft a guy that early if he's not ready to play right away. If the Colts picked him at 4, he's going to have to sit out the year. The Colts are ready to go 1-15? I don't think so. Wow. So I think you have to be careful. I think last year at this time, Malik Willis was the top 5 quarterback. Yeah, remember that. Malik Willis was going in the top 5 in every mock draft. Sometimes perception rules the day, and that's not true.
Well, Cam Newton would back up Malik Willis, who is not even the current starter for the Tennessee Titans. Maybe he knows something that we don't know. We would assume that Tannehill is going to get moved or something with a new GM and the cap hit, but you're right. There is a bunch of bullshit being floated at this exact moment. You said you've been on Bryce Young for the last month, but you weren't initially, right? And the tape completely changed you.
Yeah, and I think it's the best way to start in player value. I just didn't believe 5'10" could play. I don't want to be a height snob, but I come from the school you need height. But what Bryce Young has is the ability to work his arm and his feet together. And they're in unison. And he's got great rhythm to his play. And his instinct and his eyesight is all over the field. He really sees the game differently. And when you watch the tape, you see different. I always have a perception of a player from TV, but you got to go back and watch it on tape. For example, Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame, I loved him on TV. Not so much in love with him on the tape when you watch it.
Whoa!
Because he's still a good player.
Bengals was going to pick him.
But I think I think there's some areas where you're concerned about. Like the Washington tight end from Georgia. This is a kid everybody thinks is just a blocker, but when you watch him on tape, he jumps more in the passing game.
Yeah, and he jumps people. He's 6'7" too. I mean, that guy's 6'7". That's
exactly.
That's a 1-on-1.
Remember this: big guys. It's hard to judge big guys' quickness. Vince Lombardi said this years ago. It's hard to judge big guys' quickness, and so when you get a guy 6'7", you don't see his quickness. You could never see Gronk's quickness, but it's there. And then the other thing is, when you're 6'7", you're open even when you're covered.
You're also going to take big shots, too. You got to hope that they remain healthy. I mean, that's just kind of what the tall body, especially in that position, is going to be. Darnell looks like he's a grown-ass man.
Beast.
I can't wait to see who takes him. He's going to go earlier than anybody thinks, you think?
I think so. I mean, because he can play on the line wide, and he can be the move guy. And so you get a player that can do more. I think he impacts the passing game more than he actually does in the run game. I think he's uniquely gifted. Now, and his hands are somewhat inconsistent, but he has good hands. He can play well. He's got to be more consistent catching the football, but I think he's unique.
Ty Schmidt.
Lambeau, a lot's been made about the whole Jalen Carter not visiting any teams outside of the top 10. We had Drew Rosenhaus on yesterday, and he basically said, hey, listen, I've been doing this a long time, okay? I'm not going to go in there and set up my guy for failure. But as a former GM, how much of, the top 30 visits and all that kind of stuff, how much of that is bullshit? And then at the end of the day, do you think, all his off-the-field stuff is kind of easier to just sweep away because of how talented he is? And, when you were a GM, like how difficult is that situation where a guy's talent and his tape maybe jumps, off the screen, but it's like, oh, we have some very serious character issues here.
Yeah, I listened to Drew yesterday. I thought Drew was great. I think what he said about Lamar was true. I think if Lamar had an agent, it would be better. I do agree with what he said. And I think what he's trying to do is strengthen Carter's position in the top 10 by what he said. Now, if I called Drew up and I had a pick in the 17 or 18 and said, Drew, look, I'm going to trade up to 5. I can make this deal. I need Carter to come in. He would let Carter come in because he knows and trusts that you could do that. So a lot of these top 30s some are really serious. Some are just for the perception. Some, we got to get to know the guy because we might have to play against the player. So I think you have to separate what's real and what isn't real. I think Carter's the second best. I think it's Bryce Young and Carter in the draft. Carter's better to me than Will Anderson because he can dominate at 3 technique, 5 technique.
What about his
7.
pro day? What about that pro day?
That worries you. I think the character. Look, the biggest mistake that I go to. Some nights I wake up in a cold sweat because of the Warren Sapp draft. We're sitting there in Cleveland, me and Belichick, and we have a chance to pick Warren. And there were misinformation about Warren coming out of the league office in terms of off the field. And I hadn't done enough homework, take full accountability to really offset the rumors. And so we traded down, made a great trade down, made a bad pick, but made a great trade down. And Warren goes 12 overall to the Bucs and becomes a Hall of Fame player. That you can't have happen. So you've got to dig deep and get your own information.
Can't have it. Lombo's still waking up about it
right
now, still to this day worried about it.